joining us. Welcome to the Executive 28th of February 22. Just before we start with the agenda, with your indulgence, I'd just like to briefly comment on the war in Ukraine. I'm certain that I speak for every member of this Council when I express dismay and horror at what is happening in Ukraine. It's not for me as leader of this Council to comment on the motivation of President Putin, but it is clear to every non-combatant that this should not be happening. This Council has a well-deserved reputation for aiding people in need, not just our own residents, but also internationally. We took families in from Syria when they were displaced by war. We were one of the first councils to volunteer to take in locally employed service personnel and their families from Afghanistan when they were being hunted, tortured and killed. We are an arm of the government, and they've not yet asked us to provide shelter. And if they do, I'm sure we will do everything we can to help. In the meantime, we should do what we can now. I believe symbols are important, and as such, I've asked that we raise the flag of Ukraine in support of the people of Ukraine, both here in our borough and abroad. There are also collections taking place within the borough for goods, including tin food, sleeping bags, clothes and baby items, which are mostly heading to Poland, where the vast majority of Ukrainian refugees are heading. I've asked that we signpost these collections. Every time we find out about one, we need to signpost it and do what we can to support the terrific effort of the residents and businesses that are putting on these collections. If there are any more suggestions of what we can do from a member of any party, any persuasion, I'd be very happy to work with them. Thank you. Okay, beginning the meeting. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. There are no apologies.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay. I don't know. Oh, sorry. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. And before I declare my interest, can I just say how much I agree with what you've just said? There is a specific need at the moment for boxes that I have made officers aware about this afternoon. But I completely agree with everything you've said, and I'm delighted that you've actually, on behalf of the Council, made the comments that you have. So thank you very much for that. In terms of the declaration of interest, these are both in regard to the local plan. The first is on page 242, where reference is made about Gordon School. I do some paid employment for Gordon School. I don't have any involvement with the wider work that they do, but just to declare that. That would be pecuniary, I guess, although I only do some exam invigilating for them. And also on page 537, there is reference to land at Pine Ridge Golf Club. So this is a non-pecuniary because I am a trustee of Pine Ridge Golf Club in my capacities for fuel allotments. I'm not one of the councillor appointees, so I am one of the community representatives. So I think that is a non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you. Okay. Any other declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. Now, members, you'll know that when we have an executive, there's normally a questions by members item on the agenda. This didn't have one because it was originally posted as a single item executive, i.e. the local plan going out to consultation. But because it's now become multiple, as in we're reviewing the decisions or the recommendations from P&F about the parking fees, I have decided to put the item back in. So we will now do, if there's any questions by members, for myself or portfolio holders. Councillor Jennings-Evans.
Thank you, Leader. My question tonight is really regarding the consultation on the local plan that will be forthcoming, and I wanted to know whether Surrey County Council will be consulted purely on the basis that there has been a lot of very hard work done by this council to develop and mould the development that we want to see in our borough for our residents. But it is really important that whilst we do that, that SCC can provide, where possible, the correct infrastructure to support that. So it's really important that we get their feedback, and I just wanted to ensure that that happens going forward.
Mr. Channing?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I answered the question. Yes, there will be consultation with Surrey County Council, and also there'll be ongoing consultation once a month with them, and they'll feed into that process. So, and we advised them today of any sort of consultation or any comments they do have. They liaise with the policy team and myself if they have any issues about the consultation document itself. So yes, there will be ongoing discussion.
Thank you.
Any other questions from us? Any other questions for myself or portfolio holders? No. Okay, thank you. Right, so on to the first main item of the agenda, the draft Surrey Heath local plan. Councillor Page.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, so here we are after a great deal of work with a massive report on the local plan, which we are about to set out and put in the public domain. So this report seeks executive approval to agree this draft local plan together with the mapping booklet and the interim sustainability appraisal for public consultation. The draft local plan sets out the planning framework for the borough up to 2038, and once adopted will replace the current local plans. This draft local plan sets out more detailed planning policies and site allocations, and is based on technical evidence that we have in our borough. The development of the local plan has been informed by discussions at the cross-party local plan working group. The local plan working group has met about 20 times over the past few years to discuss the spatial strategy, the draft policies, and this process, I have to say, has been very collaborative. At the most recent meeting on the 24th of January, the local plan working group endorsed and supported this version of the draft local plan being considered for public consultation by the executive. So we have summarised that plan for all the members. And just to summarise for you, the draft local plan delivers a positive vision for the future of Surrey Heath, balanced on the need for development against significant environmental constraints. It sets a strategy to focus new development within the settlement areas to the west of the borough to optimise delivery of development in the most sustainable and accessible locations. It supports high quality and high density development on key sites in Camberley Town Centre to provide new homes, support regeneration and the future viability. And vitality, sorry, I missed that wrong. The future vitality and viability. It supports the local economy by designating 17 strategic and locally important employment sites. It promotes healthy, sustainable, cohesive local communities through good design and supporting infrastructure delivery. It supports action on climate change through mitigation and adaptation measures, including facilitating active travel. It protects the environmental assets and sets policies to secure biodiversity and net gain. So the local plan will help to deliver priorities of the 5-year strategy under the themes of environment, economy and the quality of life. And just to pick out one of those objectives in more detail, most of the questions that come into me are around housing, and I'd just like to give you a quick few bullet points on the overview of housing. A key purpose of this plan is to set out the scale and location of new homes to be built over the plan period. To determine the number of homes to be built, known as the housing requirement figure for the local draft plan, account has been taken of environmental and planning constraints. And you will understand, councillors, that we have got some planning constraints with the Thames Basin Heath, the special protection areas, and the other measures like Greenbelt that are so valuable to stop the spread of development where we don't need it. So we've worked within those constraints. So we have a standard methodology that our local housing need figure is 327 homes per year. The housing needs study, the countryside capacity study, a strategic land availability assessment and supply in the Heart local plan, and we've arrived at a requirement figure of 5,680 new homes to be delivered in the borough until 2038. So we've had some successes here, and we estimate that we can beat that deliverability because our plan identifies a potential to deliver 6,000, just over 6,000 new homes. Now the key sites you'll remember are Mindenhurst, the former Princess Royal Barracks, where we're looking to build 1,200 new homes. Some are already completed and some are still under construction. The London Road block in Camberley, where we envisage approximately 550 new homes and some other town centre uses there. And the land east of Knoll Road, where we're sitting tonight in the chamber, approximately 475 new homes. The council has also the responsibility to assess the plan for the housing needs of all residents, and that includes the gypsy and traveller community. Now, a number of options have been explored to identify sufficient sites to meet this need. However, this is challenging given the limited availability of land to deliver pitches and plots, in addition to the environmental and policy constraints in the borough. At this point, only one specific site allocation for 4 pitches is identified at Diamond Ridge Woods on the edge of the Old Dean, and it is included as a site allocation. A further call for sites is planned. An additional consultation is scheduled for summer 2022. Now, there are lots of other things in this plan, and members from all parties have had the ability to look at this. You've had a members' briefing on it, and what I would just like to do, Chairman, is to resolve that we adopt this local plan and we go out to consultation. We can, of course, make minor changes to that plan, especially if we have some feedback from our consultees, which, as we've spoken about before, will include Surrey County Council, a lot of other different agencies, and of course our own residents.
Thank you, Councillor Page. So, questions for Councillor Page on either the local plan or the going out to consultation with the local plan. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I wanted to make 2 comments, really. First is, maybe this is a personal view, and we'll find out what the views of the residents are when it comes out to the consultation. But I'm not totally sure about having a 15-storey building in London Road, but we shall perhaps see what residents say on that. My wider point is what Councillor Page kind of talked about at the end there, which is regarding gypsy and traveller pitches, which is something you'll know that I have raised on many occasions, and I'm going to raise again tonight. Because what you'll have seen from the local plan is that there is one site that we are currently putting forward, which is in Old Dean. And the only reason that this particular site is being put forward is because the councillors in Old Dean, working together positively, along with the county councillor, Trevor Hogg, actually sat down as adults, as community champions, and said, we must do something about it. And that is what we did. We got our maps out. We sat in Mr. Hogg's garden. I remember, Councillor Garrett will remember, I'm sure, very well, and looked at where do we need to put a site in Old Dean. And we looked at the whole map and looked at various options, which I won't go into. But that is why this site came forward. This land was initially ruled out by officers, and we asked them to look back at doing it again. And we know that there's further work that needs to be done. But the whole point here is that we can only move forward with any sites unless there is positive community and councillor input. And so therefore, what I would be looking for all members of the council to do for those areas, especially that don't have gypsy and traveller pitches, is to take exactly the same approach that we've done in Old Dean. Namely, sit down as adults, as community champions, get the maps out and say, we need to put some gypsy and traveller pitches in our ward. Where are they going to be? Where are the preferences that we want officers to look at? It is absolutely pointless to carry on asking for these call for sites, because if you call for sites, the answer you'll get back is nothing. I can tell you that, because that is exactly what we've had on many occasions on many other previous call for sites. So it is now time, I'm afraid, for councillors to be unpopular. And we've taken an example of that in Old Dean, because I wouldn't be prepared to kind of make these comments unless I was prepared to do it myself. And equally, I have to credit the Conservative councillors as well, who've taken the same approach. So I would be saying to particularly the Councillor Page in his ward, but also lead members as well, that you need to now do the same. You need to sit down with your colleagues at Borough Council and the County Council to get the maps of your ward out and decide if we have to, we need to put a site somewhere in my ward. Where are the sites that we need to do it? Because unless we do that, this local plan is going absolutely nowhere. We can consult as much as we like, and the inspector will throw it in the bin, because we won't have the sites. I see that we're looking at Frimley and Frimley Green. That isn't going to get us near to the numbers. So we do need to take positive, proactive action. And I would urgently support, particularly members of the executive, in terms of setting an example here, to use the model that we've done. We will happily help you if you want to, other groups as well and other councillors, but unless we do it, and we all do it, we're going to get nowhere. So I would make that plea, perhaps ask you, Leader and Councillor Page, to set a positive example for your own wards. I don't mean that as a party political thing, because I said this has been something we've done in Old Dean on a cross-party basis, but we all need to set an example now, and this is the only way we're going to actually do it.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Before I just pass to Councillor Page to answer that, I would absolutely acknowledge you and Councillor Garrett and Councillor Hogg. You said, and I'll absolutely acknowledge you've said this for as many years as I have been a councillor, which is 7. Right? You have said that, and you and the other 2 councillors have definitely put your money where your mouth is. Right? And I can understand exactly the point you're saying. But Councillor Page, if you would like to answer that.
Thank you, Leader. Of course, Councillor Bates is absolutely right. And again, I fully endorse what you've done at the Old Dean collaboratively. And that's what we're all doing, actually. And it is part of the back office team in the planning department to scour the land looking for these sites. And that is in conjunction with councillors. I have some ideas of my own for my particular ward, but it wouldn't be the right forum to talk about those here. But it's incumbent upon us all, and I do agree with you, Councillor Bates. You're right. So this plan is at risk if we don't produce those sites. But that's all I have to say, unless Mr. Chennai wanted to add anything.
Thank you, Councillor Page. I think I'm going to repeat the same comments I raised at the all-member briefing a few weeks ago. I mean, obviously, the search is continuing with the policy team. We are basically working very hard with our investment property team to investigate sites going forward. And we have a number of sites which we're looking at the moment. But obviously, we're going through the process of looking at the strategic issues and also the issues in terms of whether or not the site can be developed further. And over the next few months, that search continues, working with the policy team and working with various specialists to make sure these sites come forward. And hopefully by August, when we go out to consultation again, that we have the sites available.
Before I go back to Councillor Bates, because I always like to give people the kind of final word, right? And it's not your fault, Mr. Chennai, but we've sat here and listened to officers say pretty much word for word what you've just said. right? And we're still in a position where we have no, and I'm acknowledging that that is a problem of this administration, right? We have found it very, very difficult. In fact, virtually impossible to find the right spaces. But on the other hand, I'm sure you'll acknowledge we've sat in a number of meetings now where we've said we have to do something different. We cannot just keep doing what we're doing. As Councillor Bates said, we've done it over and over again and it hasn't resulted in, enough pitches. Right? So if we're not able to crack it the way that we're thinking we're going to do, with call for spaces and whether we're going to buy land or whatever, then we're left with Councillor Bates's point that each ward has to identify spaces in. Maybe it's both.
I think you raise a very valid point. So, I mean, what we're going to do again, we're going to go through the sites again, look through the sites again, do the full search again with officers and see whether or not there are any sites we can actually bring forward. I've also asked the team to liaise with other councils to actually see what they've done to actually bring forward the sites as well. So there's some sites on the south coast where they have liaison officers which liaise with the community as well. And also we're looking to liaise with the gypsy community itself to see if they've actually got sites themselves which they want to bring forward. So that's a piece of work which we're going to do in the future going forwards.
So, yep. Okay, Councillor Garrett.
Thank you. One of the, as Councillor Bates said, we obviously sat down and we went through this, but one of the things we went in with a mindset of looking for a couple of sites rather than a site for 15 or 20. So maybe we need to change our mindset from that respect, not try and find a large site, try and find lots of small sites, hence the reason we've had the conversation about various wards. Maybe previously we were looking at one site that fits all, and obviously that doesn't work. So maybe that's the way we need to look at it.
Well, you've done it in Old Dean, and Councillor Jennings Evans has got a small two-pitch site in Lightwater, so maybe that is. Okay, I think the most disconcerting thing I heard from Councillor Bates, and you're right to say it, is that officers have already ruled out the pitch that they came up with, and then now we've found that it is workable. So it's right to review all of the decisions again. Councillor Bates, just to give you the chance to finish off.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, I know officers worked hard on this. We all know that. But I think what's been missing here, going back over the years, is not actually anything from officers, and nor is it a party political thing, because I remember one of the previous leaders of the council actually passionately raising this issue and also being frustrated about it, as you are. But I don't see any problem at all with us actually arranging these ward member meetings now in certain areas. There's nothing, I mean, it took Old Dean about 5 minutes to arrange a meeting, and we arranged it for a few days later in a garden. So that work can take place immediately. We don't need to stop and wait for everything else to happen. If officers find more sites and review it, then great. But councillors have to take the responsibility ourselves, because if we're honest, no one else is going to do it for us. And also we can then help to shape where it is in the area. Councillor Garrett's absolutely right. A small site is the way to go, not a massive site. That wouldn't work anyway. And we already have two larger sites. So I would encourage them, and to say perhaps members of the executive to set a positive example, and group leaders, if they don't have them in their wards already, but to actually gather together the councillors in your area with the county councillor, get your map out, get some drinks on the go, and look at where they need to be in your area, and then ask the officers to look at those.
Okay. I should just say you're not implying that we have to be drunk to do this, but I know what you mean. I tell you what I will do, Councillor Bates, is I will take it on to write to every member of the council with your suggestion, and those members that want to take it up obviously are free to do so. All right, but that's what I can do. All right. Are there any other questions on the local plan or the going out to consultation? No. Okay. In that case, members of the executive, as Councillor Page said, the recommendation is in 2.1, page 5, and it's to resolve small 1, small 2, small 3. Are we agreed? Thank you. Right, Councillor Page again, local development scheme.
Thank you, Leader. Well, follows right on, really. So the timetable for producing the local plan is set out in a document called the Local Development Scheme, and I'm going to refer to it as LDS, please, because it's a bit of a tongue twister. The Council is required to produce and update this document to outline future planning documents we will be producing under the local plan. The LDS in the agenda pack sets out the milestones and timescales of adoption of the new Surrey Heath local plan in 2023. The purpose of this report is to seek executive agreement to the revised local plan preparation timetable. It's not all over yet. Obviously, we've got to consult and then do some other bits to it. The LDS sets out that the next stage of public consultation will be on the draft local plan, as we have just agreed. The LDS also sets out what we are planning with what we've just talked about as well, the further consultation on gypsy and traveller and travelling show people site allocations in summer 2022. So there is more being done on that. Following this, we have a challenging timetable of progressing to publication of a pre-submission local plan under Regulation 19 for further consultation in January and February in 2023. So before submission to the Secretary of State in June 2023, we will be leading into a local plan examination, further modifications, and finally adoption scheduled for December 2023 to align with the government's target for the adoption of all local plans. So there are, as we've already talked about, there are risks that the plan will be unsound, but those are the items that we have to take care of and make sure that they're implemented. So, Executive, what I'd like you to do tonight is to resolve that the Surrey Heath Local Development Scheme attached at Annex 1, covering the period of 2022 to 2025, be agreed and published on our website.
Thank you. If there are no questions on that. Okay, I don't see any. No. Okay, if there are no questions, members, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay. Right, and the final item, review of parking fees and charges. Just before we start on this, and Councillor Dugan introduces it, can I just remind people when we are discussing this that we're not rehashing or re-arguing the original decision. Right? We are discussing the recommendations from P&F. Okay. Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Leader. Members be aware that the decision to change the parking fees in Surrey Heath was considered and agreed by this executive on the 22nd of January, and that was then called in by a number of members for review by the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee. That committee resolved, and the items on the supplementary papers that were issued today, I think. And I want to go through the 3 points one by one. So firstly, the committee decided that the only elements of the paper that they were happy with all the elements of the paper apart from the two that I will cover in more detail, Wharf Road and Chobham. And I thank the members of the Performance and Finance Committee for that. One, as it was made, the point was made by Councillor Bates on the evening, it will have shortened that meeting significantly. So the number two is the recommendation that the fee structure at Wharf will be delayed to enable consultation with ward councillors, local businesses, residents, and then secondly, to monitor the capacity and usage of the car park. If any of you attended, either virtual or in person, the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee, you will have seen that the ward councillors were quite extensively consulted and gave their significant and quite interestingly divergent views, as indeed as our local county councillor was there. He was for the area. He was able to pass comment as well. Specifically, the recommendation asks us to consult with local businesses and residents in the immediate vicinity of the car park. I understand, and obviously I was at that meeting, and I understand where councillors are coming at with that request. However, that request sets a really unnecessary precedent for the council that wherever we look at car park charges, we would need to go out to all local businesses and all residents in the vicinity of all of our car parks. It's worth pointing out, so far as I'm aware, no other council does that. Frimley Park Hospital doesn't do that. The train stations don't do that. The NCP most definitely don't do that. And it's not something I want to get this council into. On monitoring the capacity, I'm really not sure what people think we're going to achieve by monitoring the capacity of the Wolf Road car park. If I go back to where we were when I introduced the paper initially, the car parking service, and in particular the car parks outside Camberley, run at a loss. It is fairly obvious that Wolf Road runs at a loss because it has no income. So I'm not sure what looking at the usage is going to achieve. By introducing charges, we will continue, in fact, to run at a loss, but it won't lose as much as it does today. On little 3, which concerns the Chobham car park, little a asks us to consult with Natural England, which I think, as I mentioned at the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee, we already had done. We had spoken to Natural England, we just hadn't had anything in writing for them. We now have a response from them. And again, it's worth just pointing out that Natural England have a responsibility to protect the SSSI. And they are the authority that the council needs to consult with. The resolution from the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee goes on to ask us to consult with other appropriate organisations. There aren't any other appropriate organisations. The organisation that we have to consult with is Natural England. We have done so. They have made it clear that the retention of 1 hour free parking would allay the concerns of Natural England with regards to us introducing the charges and reducing the amount of time that is free. And again, in the little b asks to explore the possible use of sign contributions to offset the costs of running Chobham car park. I don't think that that is a piece of work that needs to be done before we introduce parking charges. Indeed, it's something that we can consider after, if that will help pay for the use of the service at Chobham. So I propose that we agree this evening to introduce the charges as previously agreed at the executive of the 25th of January. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dugan. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to make reference to Councillor Dugan's comment that he had consulted with Natural England. The consultation with Natural England happened after the proposed charges had already been presented previously to the executive, I understand. And in fact, the other relevant bodies are Surrey Wildlife Trust and also the Thames Basin Heaths Partnership. Although I haven't seen the letter from Natural England, I understand from the Thames Basin Heaths Partnership that Natural England have confirmed that the change had been agreed with Surrey Heath Council this morning. This was on the 18th of February, but with conditions. And the conditions are that it must be monitored to ensure that no displacement from the SANG, that there is no displacement from the SANG to the SPA. So I would be very interested in understanding how we are going to monitor whether or not there is any displacement from the SANG to the SPA, what shape that monitoring is going to take, and how we are going to ensure that it happens. Now, for those of you that aren't local to Chobham, you may or may not recall that car parking charges were introduced within the car parks on the common. And the result of the introduction of that was that the car parks were empty and the common was empty, which is great from an SPA and a triple SI point of view, but isn't so great for people's right of access to our common land. So I would be very interested to understand how we're going to monitor it, how we're going to report on it, how frequently we're going to report on it, and if there is found to be displacement, what action will be taken, and also what base figures as a council we will be utilising to monitor the displacement or otherwise. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Duggan?
Yeah, thank you. So the monitoring of the car park wasn't a condition. It was, in effect, an advisory, and it is something we'll be happy to do. We will use the ticket sales, which is the simplest way for us to monitor change in use. We'll use a baseline pre-pandemic, and we will monitor ticket sales and footfall on the sign.
Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you. If I may come back, the impact that we're looking to monitor and the impact that I understand, and maybe it would be helpful if Councillor Duggan would be kind enough to share the letter or the response that came back from Natural England, because certainly the wording that came through from the Thames Basin Heath Partnership was that it is a condition that it must be monitored. And what we're wanting to monitor here is the displacement from the SANG to the SPA. So people may well continue to visit Chobham Car Park for an hour, but they may well be displaced for their exercise onto the SPA. So it's how we are going to monitor, surely, the displacement from the SANG to the SPA. But, you know, if Councillor Duggan is saying that Natural England didn't put any condition of monitoring on it, and that they weren't suggesting that we should robustly monitor, then that's a completely different matter. And I think that's something that certainly my residents will be taking up with Natural England for so poorly protecting our triple SI.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
I guess in the simplest ones is yes, I'm happy to share the email exchange with Natural England. And as I say, we will monitor by the use of ticket sales and happy to report those monthly.
I take
With
your
respect,
point.
that's not monitoring the effect on the triple SI. And the other point was whether or not we would consider a contribution of sales, which was the other recommendation, in order to offset the need to introduce, in order to offset the cost of continuing with the 2 hours free parking at Chobham Car Park, because it would offset it. I'm incredibly disappointed that we haven't taken a more holistic view to this particular car park.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I think, from my view, I take the point that you're saying, and I accept what Councillor Duggan's saying, that it's not a condition, but that's about looking at the paperwork and seeing. But it's an interesting point, the difference between monitoring who uses the car park for the SANG and looking to see if that is displaced. I think I'm happy to work with the officers and Councillor Duggan and have a look at how we might do that. The first thing to establish, of course, is whether it is actually a condition or whether it's just a recommendation. But even if it's a recommendation, it's worth giving some thought to. So I'm happy to work with Councillor Duggan and the officers and see if there is a realistic way of monitoring that and seeing what happens. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bates?
Thank you. You're right to say that this isn't a kind of rehashing of the debate that we've had on a couple of occasions. What I would say is that a number of the points that Councillor Dugan made when he introduced this item, he made at the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee. The Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee resolution you have before you was unanimous. Whilst he was correct in saying that there was a difference of view from the Frimley Green councillors in regard to that item, when it actually came to the final vote was unanimous. So it wasn't a matter of any differences in terms of the particular resolution you have before you. Whilst obviously the executive do have the final decision on this, subject to any further procedures that may, could be undertaken, but in reality, the executive have the final say on this. I do think that's worth bearing in mind here. This isn't a party political matter. This is a matter where it has been unanimously agreed by the committee. What I would say is I hope a positive way forward here is that if it is the case that the executive, despite the unanimous views of the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee, decide they wish to go ahead anyway, is that at least with Chobham, that is actually reviewed in a very short period of time, whether it's 6 months or a year or whatever, because this issue of the impact on the SSSI is obviously very concerning. And I appreciate, you may have one view and others may have others, but this is something that we can't mess around with. So I would suggest that if you are, so determined to go ahead, that you don't wish to kind of take on board some of the comments that have been made, but for goodness sake, let's at least review this. And let's at least see that if damage is being caused through the means that we've talked about, that we can then quickly make sure that that is not permanent damage, but is only a temporary measure. And I would urge that that is at least considered, even if you decide not to accept anything else that the Performance and Finance Committee unanimously agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Bates. Oh, Councillor Dugan.
The process is the Performance and Finance Committee reflect their points back to the executive for their consideration. We have considered them. We haven't treated them flippantly at all. I've explained why, in essence, in some of these cases, we can't agree with what you've done because it would just put the council in an impossible position in the future. So, unanimous or not, and I totally accept it was unanimous, as I say, I was there. In terms of Chobham Car Park, as I say, we've outlined what the monitoring that we propose to do. The leader has said he will work with Councillor Wheeler and myself to come up with a better solution if we think there is one. If not, and the decision that will be made this evening was based on the fact we will do monthly ticket sales monitoring.
I think, Councillor Bates, out of all of this, the SANG and the SSI, as put forward by Councillor Wheeler, obviously is that. I think for me, what it boils down to is if Natural England, whose job it is to actually, be the expert on this, if they had expressed any kind of concern, I think I'd be inclined to do exactly what you're saying, is let's stick a pin in it, monitor it, see if we can come up with something better. But from the paperwork we've had from the people who are the experts and whose job it is to monitor this stuff, they're saying, yeah, an hour's fine. I think it's an unpalatable decision because nobody wants to put up parking charges or make anybody's lives even just a little bit harder by having to pay for things. But unfortunately, part of the deal of being the executive is that you have to at times make unpalatable decisions. I'm going to give Councillor Wheeler another go. Councillor Wheeler?
Okay, so this is the last time that I will try with this point. We put forward at the committee an alternative way to realise the revenue that would result through the introduction of the 2 hours the reduction from the 2 hours to the 1 hour. It's a fairly nominal amount, and every other Sangs car park pays a contribution towards car parking. So this cost could be very readily offset. My understanding from the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Group is that they weren't consulted by Natural England. And I absolutely 100% accept that Sangs, you can walk round if you are a fit, able person around the Sangs in an hour, but we have to look at people's pattern of behaviour. And that Sangs, people don't park and use the Sangs purely for an hour. And when they introduced car parking charges on Chobham Common, people were displaced. That evidence is absolutely there. As I said, the report that I had back was that the Natural England had asked us to robustly monitor. Looking at the car parking charges or the number of tickets that are issued or otherwise in the Chobham car park isn't necessarily going to show what is displaced, because a large percentage of the time the ticket machine is actually not working. So that's something else. So given that the introduction of these charges is to generate revenue to maintain our car parks, there is an alternative revenue source that would do that very effectively, and that seems to have been dismissed out of hand. And that was a unanimous decision and the unanimous proposal that was put forward to the executive committee. I appreciate that I am labouring the point. I am obviously very passionate about this. Since there has been more awareness of it locally, I have also been contacted by the Sam Bear Hospice shop to say that they feel that they will lose their volunteers as a result of this, and other people that use it for very charitable. You know, we have to be a self-serving and self-supporting village with our community groups. I haven't even argued it from point of view. I'm arguing it purely from a revenue point of view. We have a different revenue stream that could be considered. We are just right now moving into the ground nesting bird season on the common. I'm not sure the exact date. My understanding is that these changes will be implemented very rapidly. If we could have a delay till September to look at alternative ways of doing it and to monitor it, I would be incredibly grateful. It's the worst possible time to be introducing these charges. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler, first of all, just as an aside, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being passionate about your job and who you represent, and you're to be commended for it. You kind of strayed off the bit about the we're only talking about what P&F suggested, but you know, passion comes through. I think your last point, well, the second last point about you're talking about using SIL money in order to offset the costs of running the car park, correct?
It's the Sangs portion of the. It's a SIL money, because every other Sang gives, every other Sang has a contribution from the SILs for the car parking that is on site.
I just wanted to be clear, we were talking about SIL money, because not many people would know what we meant by Sang money.
Sorry.
It's okay, SIL money, right. Councillor Dugan on that point?
I guess the 2 points that Councillor Wheeler raises are inextricably linked. The bottom line is, as I've said, Natural England are the authority on Sangs. We have asked them if it is okay by them that we reduce the free parking from 2 hours to 1, and as the authority, they have said yes. I did comment on your and the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee's comment on looking at alternative sources of funding, and I agree it's a great idea, and I've said that we will do that afterwards, and if it can be used, then all well and good. We will have both sources of income.
Okay, and I've just I've been told that we're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks before charging would be introduced if we take the decision this evening. Is that about right? Oh, yeah. Mr. Stevens?
Yes, thank you, Leader. There's a 3-week notice period after which parking charges could be incurred. May I also make a point on the SIL monies as well? It might be a question to pose to our head of planning in terms of whether that money could be reproportioned towards the cost of the car park.
All right. Okay. Well, next time there's a bus coming down the road, I'll just make sure that you're not anywhere near. Just to get back to the amount of time, right, you're saying, let's just be clear on this, there's a 3-week advertising period. And when would the advertising begin?
It depends on the publication schemes for the newspapers, but typically it would start on a Wednesday or a Friday.
Okay, so that's next week. All right, so that's 1 week, then 3 weeks of advertising. And then how long behind that before we then did the signage and changed the machines, etc.?
That would be done at the same time as the notice period.
It'll be done in parallel. So we'll be looking at about 4 weeks max if we make the decision this evening. Correct? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, Councillor Wheeler, not immediate, but only 4 weeks away. Okay. Mr. Chairman, how would you like to comment on, basically the question was about SIL money being used. Do you have a view on that?
I mean, when SANG is allocated, I mean, obviously you pay what is needed in terms of space for development. So you wouldn't be able to use that money to actually use as a maintenance to that. There would need to be an additional sort of money put aside for that. So you couldn't use the actual SIL money to actually maintain the existing SANG.
I think the point was about using SIL money as some way of maintaining the car park. Was that? But
sorry, to actually maintain the SIL car park. That's what I meant. Sorry,
okay,
yes.
so that's a no.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Bates.
Thank you. I had to smile when you talked about making unpopular decisions as a Labour councillor who's just spent ages just talking about gypsy sites in their own ward. But nonetheless, let's see if that's one side. In terms of Natural England, what I think you're saying is that because you have a response from Natural England saying that they are okay or whatever the wording is on it, that you're comfortable to proceed. In the event of Natural England changing their mind, and you receiving a letter that says they're unhappy now, can I just check, would there therefore be an immediate review of this decision, irrespective of when that letter is actually received? Just so that we're absolutely clear about that.
Councillor Dugan?
I think there'd be an immediate review of Natural England's change of mind.
So yes. Yeah, if Natural England changed their mind and suddenly the letter came in saying we've got grave concerns or don't do it, then yeah, we would stop and look. Because if we're going to hang our hat on, let's be face it, we're going to hang our hat on that they're the experts and it's their job. If they came back, if they had have come back already and said we've got a problem, we would be stopping and reviewing and seeing what we needed to do. So yes, the answer is yes.
Yes, okay, I just wanted to clarify. So I appreciate that we've got a letter now, but if, for example, there is damage caused along the lines that it said, and you receive a letter, whether it's in 4 months or whenever, then the executive would then immediately review the decision that you've made, is what you're basically saying.
Are you implying that perhaps at some time in the not too distant future, someone may actually inform the Natural England that there's damage, and then they want to then come back and review something? If that's the case, I'm sure we would review it.
Leader, it's not really for me to be making letters. I think you'll find there's probably more than enough correspondence to Natural England. It's really the Natural England position is what I'm trying to clarify. As you said, you've hung your hat on it. So if Natural England do send a letter saying that their position has changed for whatever reason, it's a purely factual question. Is it the case that the council will then review the position on the car park in accordance with Natural England advice? My belief is what you're saying is yes, we would. And I think that's just important to put that into the public mind. It's not about whether I or anybody else will write to them. That's irrelevant. It's the Natural England position that I just wish to clarify, and how much weight we're putting on it. And I think you're saying that is what we're hanging it on, basically.
Yeah. Let me be explicit. You don't, the answer is, yeah, we're relying on Natural England here for their professional input. And if their input is that they have concerns, we would have to address those. Okay. All right. Okay. I think there are no more questions. All right. Okay. So, members of the executive, as Councillor Dugan has suggested, if you look at, sorry, page 666. It's not, if only there'd been a sign. Page 666. The executive can do A, B, or C. C is not particularly helpful as a proposal. And I have here to agree to endorse the decision taken by executive on the 25th of January 2022 on the review of parking fees and charges. Right. Are we agreed to do that? Agreed. Okay. Well, the decision has been made. Okay. All right. There being no more on the agenda, thank you very much for your time again this evening. Thank you, members, and anyone who's looking in. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.